Well, hello everyone. This is Fadi, and I don't know about you, but it has been a blast really to go through these videos in this particular series, because we have been unpacking a lot of information that many of you have been exposed to when it comes to the basically the historical criticism of Islam, its origin, its start, its location, for instance, the place or the book or the man. But we've been doing it, myself and Dr. J. Smith, in a way that we are really putting it all together for you. We're taking all of this info that you've been exposed to and simplifying it in a way that every one of these short episodes hopefully could be utilized as one train of thought that you can have a discussion with a Muslim, for instance, or use it as a way to build upon in your dialogue or your argument or your basically interactions with somebody who is trying, let's say, critique the history of the Bible or the New Testament, or a Muslim who's trying to defend basically their standard Islamic narrative. Whatever the case might be, we're hoping that these videos will be a powerful tool in your toolbox. Today, we are going to continue with the many problems of Mecca that exist even when we use the standard Islamic narrative itself. And with us here is our dear brother, Dr. J. Smith, to do so. Dr. J, thank you again. And last time, we began to talk about the importance of Mecca and what do Muslims claim about it.
Yeah, and it's not just what Muslims claim. They have to claim it because of the Qur'an and because of the standard Islamic narrative. The standard Islamic narrative, which is based on the CIRA and the Hadith and the Tafsir and the Tarikh, are traditionally known as the traditions, the Sunnah of the Prophet. They all make claims about this place called Mecca. So let's start with the Qur'an first. Let's go right to the Qur'an and let's go to our slide. On the slide, as you're looking there, these are inferences to Mecca in the Qur'an. So the first one that we notice is that, before we go on, let me just make this caveat as these are coming up. Nowhere in any of these references that you see up there, nowhere is the word Mecca used except in chapter 48, verse 24. That's surprising. Why is that surprising?
Well, it is surprising. I mean, remember, we started by saying last time that the Muslims really think of Mecca as is a very important city, very important place. And if that's the case, I'm going to draw kind of like a comparison and say Jerusalem is a big deal. Yet Jerusalem in the Bible mentioned many times in many in many books in the Bible over the course of history. You would expect the same thing about Mecca. I mean, especially the fact that you're telling me Adam and Eve, were there, Abraham and Ishmael were there. We're talking big names here, technically speaking, but we're not finding any of that. So that's why it is important to point out that there is absence of the reference to Mecca except in one place, using the right and correct pronunciation, by the way.
Okay, let's look at the slide again. And when we bring up the slide, we notice that the first sanctuary appointed for mankind was that at Mecca. And that's the one you're referring to. Could that be Mecca? In Mecca, you know that the consonants for Mecca and Mecca are completely different, aren't they?
Yes, absolutely.
And remember, when this was written out, when the Quran was written out, there was no vowelization. So it's even more secure that this would be Mecca, not a B. A beam that would be not there. So you can see it's obvious for those who are making this claim that Mecca is Mecca, they don't know Arabic.
Either that or just the way it was written, it was confusing to the scribe and maybe they couldn't really decipher what it was. It was a B with a dot underneath it, or was a meme, like M, technically speaking, and they
with a circle in the tail.
Yeah,
that's
confused
true.
the dot with the meme.
Okay. So you can see that as far as I'm concerned, Mecca is what it was meant to be, and Mecca is a place, and there we know where the Mecca Valley is, and that is also biblical. It's right through the Bible. Secondly, Mecca is the mother of all settlements, but it doesn't say Mecca. It just says the place of the prophet is the mother of all settlements in chapter 6, verse 92, and chapter 42, verse 7. We referred to this earlier, that in chapter 7, verse 24, Adam and Eve were thrown down to earth, according to the traditions, Eve was thrown down to this place called Mecca, because remember, the traditions are now unpacking what the Quran is saying in chapter 7, verse 24. The traditions where we're talking about this is written in the late 9th century is redacting it back to what the Quran is inferring. And of course, at that time, in the 9th century, Mecca was well known. So they would use the word Mecca, referring to this is where Eve was sent to. Adam would have been sent to Sri Lanka. And then we go to chapter 21, verse 51 to 71 that we talked about earlier, and that refers to the prophet is there in the city of the prophet, doesn't give the word Mecca, but according to the traditions, again, according to Sahih Bukhari and others, they all say that this is Mecca, where this is taking place, where he goes into the Kaaba, because where else is there a Kaaba except in Mecca in the 9th century? Well, there were many Kaabas, as we're going to find. Almost every hamlet had a Kaaba. Kaabas were quite numerous. A Kaaba just means a cube. It's the same word that you find in Hebrew. It just means a cube, a place where the idols are all kept in every town. Now, so that's in chapter 21, verse 51 to 71. We do know from the traditions that Muhammad was born there. The traditions written in the 9th century, 833, Ibn Hisham talks about it. In the 9th century, Mecca would have been well known by that time, and that he was born there in 570, and that he moved from Mecca up to Medina in 622. So that's what the traditions tell us. We also know in chapter 2, verse 149 to 150, the Masjid al-Haram. What does Masjid al-Haram mean?
Well, it means like basically like the holy court or the holy place of gathering, the holy, mosque, technically speaking.
Yeah, it's the forbidden place of bowing.
Right.
So the Masjid al-Haram was, in chapter 2, verse 149, was that the direction of prayers were to be towards the Masjid al-Haram, which used to be further north, and then it was sent down to the direction of prayer was then sent down to the Masjid al-Haram. That's all it says in chapter 2, verse 149 to 150. It doesn't say Mecca. It just says that the direction of prayer must go to the Masjid al-Haram. That, of course, all the traditions and every Muslim believes that was Mecca. So that was a change of the Qibla in 622. According to the traditions, that happens 624, 2 years after Muhammad had moved there in 622. 2 years later, it was changed down from, according to the traditions, from Jerusalem back down to the Mecca. So all of these appear. These imply that people live there from the very beginning. So from the very beginning, all right through to Abraham, right on through to Muhammad himself, Mecca was there. It's very clear, according to the Quran, that this place, this Masjid al-Haram, or this place of the Prophet, existed. That is very secure according to the standard Islamic narrative. Let's go to the traditions itself. Let's look to the next slide. So when we look at the next slide, look at the enormous amount of vegetation that it talks about. These are the traditions now in the Quran. Both the Quran traditions, look and see what they say. So let's look at the slide here. You can see it's the place of the Prophet. And this place of the Prophet, it doesn't say Mecca so much, but it does later on in the traditions, is in a valley and a parallel valley. Is that true when you've been to Mecca?
Well, I'm not aware of things like this as described, of course.
It has a stream going through it. Does Mecca, when you were there, have a stream going through it?
Not that I'm aware of. Not that I missed something like this. It would have been a big deal for people to go, at least, and maybe camp around it or visit or do things like this.
In chapter 37 of the Quran, when the Prophet was leaving this place, his city, he would pass this pillar of salt as he was leaving, and when he come back in the evening, he passes this pillar of salt again. Is that there somewhere? Do they show where that is in Mecca today?
Not at all.
So there's no pillar of salt there today, right? So that's just kind of missing completely. That it has fields, according to Al-Bukhari. That it has trees, according to Tirmidhi. That it has grace, according to Al-Bukhari. Al-Bukhari also talks about the fruit. And then you have Al-Tabari talking about the clay, the loam. And then in chapter 6, verse 141, in chapter 16, and in chapter 80 of the Quran itself, it refers to olive trees. That this place where the Prophet lives, it has olive trees. Now, hold on a minute. I've got a problem with that. You've got a problem. I'd like to hear what you think of that. What does this suggest you? Fields, trees, grass, clay, fruit, olive trees, streams. What does this suggest to you?
Well, this is like a completely different city than the one I'm used to. I mean, this is a fertile valley, basically, that has all sort of things. And there are some things that are missing. For instance, this olive tree, even fig mentioned, as well as if it's in reference to the surrounding area of Mecca. No fig trees, no olive trees. And you cannot say, well, they used to be there and they're no longer there, but we don't have evidence that they ever existed in the first place.
There are olive trees there today, and I know some people have come back to me and said, Jay, look at there, here's some pictures of olive trees in Mecca. Today, when there's water, desalinated water that has been desalinated because of the Red Sea and because of all these Bechtel organization, company that has desalinated it for the Saudi Arabia, there is water today, olive trees can now grow. But back in the 7th century and earlier, the only olive trees that existed were up in the Mediterranean, 600 miles further north. But this doesn't, by looking at it, this does not look like the Mecca you're referring to, the Mecca you grew up with, the Mecca you used to visit all the time, sometimes even on the afternoon to go and do the Kaaba, to going to do the prayers. That doesn't at all support the Mecca we know.
That is correct.
Not in the valley. Mecca does not have any of these listed above. And the reason why is because it's a desert. It's much too arid and dry to support any of the above. We're going to get back to that, but that's hugely significant. I wanted to put it in there because what we're seeing about both the Quran and about the traditions is that do not support what we know of Mecca or what we knew of Mecca. This is not a Mecca from the 7th century or any century earlier than the 7th century. Today, yes, today you can find these items there, but not back then. That's the first problem. We're going to get into another one. We're going to then look at some geographical locations, especially 3 geographical locations in the next episode.
Wonderful. Thank you so much as always. And everybody, we can't wait until you can join us next time. Until then, have a blessed day. Thank you for watching this video. Be sure to like and subscribe to our channel CIRA International and click on the bell so that you receive notifications whenever we publish a new video or go live. I would also like to appeal to you to consider becoming a Patreon patron by clicking the link right below. By doing so, you can give towards the production of these videos. There are also other options for you where you can give to our channel. I thank you from the bottom of my heart.